Chapter 1. The collapsing snow fell like a shroud. Elena stumbled through the forest, her breath coming in ragged gasps that burned her throat. Her wedding dress now torn and mud-stained dragged behind her, catching on frozen branches. She didn't care. She couldn't stop. Behind her, the village lights glowed warm and mocking, filled with people who had watched her humiliation and done nothing. "I cannot marry a woman with such darkness in her blood," Marcus had announced before the entire congregation, his voice ringing off the chapel stones. Her mother was mad, her grandmother before her. "I will not curse my children with tainted lineage." The rejection had been public, calculated, devastating. Elena had fled before the whispers could fully begin, before pity could settle like ash on her skin. She'd run into the winter forest wearing nothing but the white gown that was supposed to mark her new beginning, the delicate slippers that were never meant for frozen ground. Now, hours later, she could no longer feel her feet. The trees pressed close, their bare branches skeletal against the moonless sky. Somewhere behind her, wolves howled, or perhaps it was only the wind. Elena's vision blurred. She'd stopped shivering some time ago, which she dimly understood was a terrible sign. Her grandmother had warned her about the cold. During those final lucid months before the madness took her completely, "The ice gets in your blood," she'd whispered, clutching Elena's hand with fingers like bird bones. "It makes you see things that aren't there. Makes you believe in monsters." Elena believed in monsters now, not the supernatural kind. Those were children's tales. Real monsters wore human faces and smiled while they destroyed you. Real monsters convinced an entire village that a woman's worth could be measured by her bloodline, that grief and loss were the same as insanity. She stumbled over a root hidden beneath the snow. Her hands struck frozen ground, and she couldn't find the strength to rise. The cold was almost peaceful now, a numbness that promised to erase everything. The humiliation, the loneliness, the terrifying question of what came next. "I could just sleep," she thought distantly. Just for a moment. The snow continued to fall, covering her outstretched fingers, her tangled dark hair, the ruined white dress. Elena's eyes drifted closed. She didn't see the figure that emerged from the darkness between the trees. Consciousness returned slowly, reluctantly, dragging Elena up from a dreamless void. She became aware of warmth, first blissful, shocking warmth that made her extremities burn as feeling returned. Then light, soft and golden, filtering through her closed eyelids. Then the scent of burning wood and something else, something herbal and unfamiliar. She forced her eyes open. Stone ceiling, rough-hewn beams, the crackle of a fire somewhere to her left. She lay on something soft, a bed, she realized, piled with heavy furs and woolen blankets. Not her bed. Not anyone's bed she recognized. Elena sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it as the room tilted. She pressed a hand to her forehead, waiting for the dizziness to pass, and took stock. She still wore the wedding dress, though someone had removed the worst of the mud and ice. Her feet were wrapped in clean bandages. A cup of water sat on a small table within reach. "You're awake." The voice came from the shadows near the door, low, quiet male. Elena's gaze snapped toward it, her heart suddenly hammering. He stood perfectly still, so motionless she might have missed him if he hadn't spoken. Tall, lean, dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb the firelight. His face remained in shadow, but she could see the sharp line of his jaw, the pale column of his throat. "Where am I?" Elena's voice came out hoarse, unused. "Safe." He didn't move. "For now." "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters at present." A pause. "You were dying in the snow. I brought you here." Elena pulled the furs closer, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. "Why? Why did I save you?" Something that might have been amusement flickered in his tone. "Would you prefer I'd left you to freeze?" "I'd prefer to understand." She forced steel into her voice, refusing to show fear. "Men don't rescue strange women from forests without reason. What do you want?" He stepped forward into the firelight, and Elena's breath caught. Beautiful, inhumanly beautiful. Features too perfectly symmetrical, skin too pale and flawless, eyes too dark and depthless. He looked perhaps 30, but something in those eyes suggested he'd seen far more years than his face revealed. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and he moved with an eerie, predatory grace. "My name is Lucian," he said quietly. "This cottage belongs to me. You'll remain here until the storm passes and you're strong enough to travel. Then what? Then you return to your village." His expression remained neutral. "Or you don't. That choice is yours." Elena studied him, trying to understand what felt so wrong, so other about him. His chest didn't rise and fall with breath. He cast a shadow, but it seemed too deep to solid. And his eyes, when the firelight caught them, they reflected like an animal's. What are you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Lucian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You should rest. We'll speak more when you've recovered. I don't want to rest. I know what you want. He turned toward the door, movements liquid and impossibly silent. You want the world to make sense again. You want the pain to stop. You want to understand why people are cruel. He paused in the doorway, not looking back. Unfortunately, I can only offer you shelter. The rest, you'll have to find yourself. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with the fire and 1,000 questions burning hotter than the flames. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the darkness, something howled. Chapter 2. The watcher. Elena didn't sleep. She lay beneath the firs, watching shadows dance across the stone ceiling, listening to the cottage settle around her. Wind moaned through cracks in the shutters. The fire crackled and hissed, but beneath those familiar sounds, she heard nothing else. No footsteps, no breathing, no sign of the man Lucian who had brought her here. It should have been comforting. Instead, it set her nerves on edge. She'd spent her entire life learning to read people, to anticipate moods and reactions. Growing up with a grandmother who slipped between lucidity and madness had taught her to notice details others missed: the slight tremor in a hand, the particular quality of silence before an episode, the way reality could fracture without warning. Lucian was wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. Wrong, like a painting where the proportions were almost correct, but fundamentally skewed. Wrong, like words spoken in a familiar language that nonetheless conveyed alien meaning. When gray dawn light finally seeped through the shutters, Elena rose. Her feet ached beneath the bandages, but she could walk. The room was small, sparse: just the bed, the table, a chair, and a trunk in the corner. No personal effects, no indication anyone actually lived here. She found her boots by the door, cleaned and dried. Someone had left a woolen dress folded on the chair, simple, dark green, several sizes too large but serviceable. Elena changed quickly, grateful to be rid of the wedding gown. She bundled the white silk into a corner, willing herself not to think about what it represented. The cottage consisted of only 3 rooms, she discovered. The bedroom, a main living area with the fireplace and a rough wooden table, and what appeared to be a storage room containing preserved foods, firewood, and various implements she didn't recognize. Everything was meticulously organized, but somehow lifeless, as if no one had truly inhabited this space in years. Lucian was nowhere to be found. Elena stood in the main room, uncertain. Leave? Stay? Search for answers? Before she could decide, the door opened. He entered with an armful of firewood, moving with that same unsettling grace. His dark eyes found her immediately, and for a moment, neither spoke. You should be resting, he said finally, setting the wood beside the hearth. I've rested enough. Elena crossed her arms. How long was I unconscious? Through the night. It's past dawn now. And where were you? His gaze sharpened slightly. Does it matter? You saved my life. You brought me to your home. Yet you vanish the moment I wake. Elena kept her voice steady. Forgive me for being curious about my mysterious benefactor. Lucian straightened, brushing bark from his sleeves with deliberate care. In the gray daylight filtering through the windows, his pallor was even more pronounced. I don't sleep at night. I find it uncomfortable. I prefer to work during those hours. Work doing what? Gathering wood, checking traps, ensuring we're not followed. He moved to the table, where a loaf of bread and a crock of butter had appeared. She hadn't noticed them before. You need to eat. Elena approached slowly, her mind cataloging inconsistencies. The cottage was well stocked, yet clearly unused. He gathered firewood in the dead of night, during a snowstorm. He spoke of being followed with casual certainty, as if danger was expected rather than theoretical. Who would follow us? She asked, sitting at the table. The same people you fled from, perhaps. Lucian remained standing, watching her with those impossibly dark eyes. Small villages rarely let their scandals escape so easily. They don't care what happened to me. Marcus made that clear. Marcus is a fool. The words came swift and cold. But not everyone in your village shares his cowardice. Some will wonder where you went. Some will come looking. Elena tore a piece of bread, found she couldn't eat it. Let them look. I have nothing to return to. Silence stretched between them. Lucian tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You're calmer than I expected," he said quietly. "Than you expected?" Most people would be frightened. Alone in a stranger's cottage, miles from anywhere, no way to call for help. He stepped closer, and Elena forced herself not to retreat. "Yet you sit there asking questions as if we're having tea in a parlor. Should I be frightened?" "That depends." His voice dropped lower. "Are you afraid of things that hide in darkness? Things that shouldn't exist?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "I've spent my life being afraid of whispers and judgments, and the madness in my own blood. If you mean to harm me, you've already missed your opportunity. If you don't," she shrugged, "then I'll take my chances with whatever you are." Something flickered across Lucian's face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He turned away, moving to the window. "The storm hasn't passed. You'll need to stay at least another day." "That doesn't answer my question." "I know." He stood silhouetted against the gray light, perfectly motionless. "You should understand something, Elena. This cottage exists on the boundary between two worlds. The village, you know, with its churches and markets and cruel certainties. And another world, older and darker, governed by different rules." "What kind of rules?" "The kind that keep monsters in check." He glanced back at her. "The kind that prevent them from slaughtering entire villages when the hunger becomes too great." Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice level. "Are you trying to frighten me now?" "I'm trying to warn you." Lucian crossed back to her, close enough that she could see the absolute absence of warmth in his skin, the way no pulse beat at his throat. "You asked what I am. The answer is something your village would kill you for consorting with, something that should not shelter human women in isolated cottages." "Then why did you?" The question hung between them, sharp and inevitable. Lucian's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, really looked, as if seeing past her face into something deeper. "Because I remember what it feels like," he said softly, "to lie dying in the snow, abandoned by everyone who should have protected you. And I am not so far removed from humanity that I can witness that suffering and walk away." Before Elena could respond, he moved to the door. "Stay inside today. Don't open the door for anyone but me. If you hear voices in the forest, ignore them." Lucian, but he was already gone. The door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty cottage, Elena sat alone at the table. Bread forgotten, her mind racing, monsters, hunger, rules that kept them in check. What have I stumbled into? Outside, something moved through the trees, too large to be a wolf, too silent to be human, and the snow continued to fall. Chapter 3. Shadows and Sustenance. Elena spent the day exploring her gilded cage. The cottage revealed its secrets slowly, reluctantly. In the storage room, she found jars of preserved fruit that should have spoiled years ago, but remained perfectly intact. A locked trunk that rattled when she nudged it with her foot. Books stacked in careful piles, some in languages she recognized, others in scripts that looked ancient and indecipherable. Most tellingly, she found no food that required recent preparation. No eggs, no milk, no meat. Only things that could last indefinitely without attention. As if the cottage's owner had no regular need for sustenance, the implications made her hands tremble as she set a book back on its pile. By midday, hunger forced her to eat the bread Lucian had provided. It was surprisingly good, dense and nutty, clearly baked by someone who understood the craft. But who had baked it? Not Lucian, surely. She couldn't imagine those pale, steady hands kneading dough. She was examining a particularly old volume, something about European noble houses, when she heard it. Voices in the forest. Elena froze, the book forgotten in her lap. Through the shuttered windows, she could hear them clearly. Men's voices calling her name. "Elena? Elena, if you're out here, answer us." It was Thomas, Marcus's brother, and others she recognized. John the blacksmith's deep baritone, young Peter's higher pitch. A search party from the village. Her first instinct was to run to the door, to call out, to end this strange isolation. These were people she'd known her entire life. They'd come looking for her. They cared. But Lucian's warning echoed in her mind. "Don't open the door for anyone but me." Elena moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. She could see them now, 5 men with torches, moving through the snow-laden trees. They were perhaps 50 yards from the cottage, close enough that she could make out their worried expressions. "Check that cottage," Thomas ordered, pointing directly at her hiding place. Elena's breath caught. She stepped back from the window, heart pounding. What should she do? Let them find her. They would take her back to the village, back to the whispers and the pity and the life that had shattered around her. But staying here meant trusting a man, a creature who admitted to being something the village would kill her for consorting with. The men's footsteps crunched through snow, drawing closer. Elena pressed herself against the wall beside the door, hands clenched in the borrowed dress. Then she heard another sound. Soft footsteps on the cottage roof. A shadow passed across the window to fluid, to quick. The men outside stopped abruptly. What was that? Peter's voice, sharp with fear. Probably just a bird, John said, but he didn't sound convinced. Birds don't move like that. Thomas's voice had changed, taken on a wary edge. This place feels wrong. We should go. But what if she's in there? If she'd survived this far, she'd have answered when we called. Thomas was already backing away. Elena could hear it in his voice. The storm was too fierce. She couldn't have made it this deep into the forest. We should at least check. No, the word came out hard, final. My brother humiliated her in front of everyone. If she ran this far, it's because she wanted to disappear. We'll tell the village we searched. We'll say we found no trace. And we'll let her rest in peace. The footsteps retreated. Within minutes, the voices faded entirely, swallowed by the vast silence of the winter forest. Elena remained frozen against the wall, processing what she'd heard. They thought her dead. They were going to tell the village she'd perished in the storm. In their minds, they were granting her mercy, allowing her to vanish without the shame of returning. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt unmoored, as if the last thread connecting her to her old life had just been severed. The door opened without warning. Lucian stepped inside, snow dusting his dark hair and shoulders. His eyes found her immediately, reading her expression with unnerving accuracy. You heard them, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. But Elena nodded anyway. And you didn't call out. He closed the door, shutting out the cold. Why? Elena couldn't answer immediately. She moved to the table, sank into the chair, tried to organize her thoughts. You warned me not to open the door. I assumed you had reason. I did. Lucian remained by the entrance, watching her with that predatory stillness. Those men carried iron and silver, blacksmith's tools, blessed by your village priest. They weren't just searching for you. They were hunting you. Hunting something. He moved to the hearth, adding wood to the fire with mechanical precision. Your village has stories. Old warnings about the forest, about things that dwell in darkness. Most have forgotten why they avoid these woods, but some remember. Elena studied his profile, illuminated by growing flames. What happened to make them remember? 3 winters ago, a girl from your village wandered too far during a harvest festival. She was found drained of blood, bite marks on her throat. Lucian's voice remained neutral, factual. The village priest declared it the work of demons. Hunting parties scoured the forest for weeks. Did they find anything? They found what I allowed them to find. Wolves mostly. A few bears. Enough natural predators to explain away the death without invoking the supernatural. He turned to face her. But some weren't satisfied with that explanation. They've been watching the forest ever since. And the girl? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Did you? No, the word came sharp and certain. I don't feed on children. I don't feed on the unwilling. Those are the rules that govern my kind, or at least, those of us who retain our humanity. His expression darkened. But not all of us follow those rules. Elena absorbed this, her mind working through implications. You're saying another vampire killed that girl? Yes. And you did nothing to stop it? I wasn't here. Bitterness crept into Lucian's tone. I'd left these lands, thinking distance might help with certain difficulties. When I returned and learned what had happened, the damage was done. So you hide here, alone, pretending this cottage is abandoned. I exist here, he corrected. There's a difference. Elena rose, moved closer to the fire to him. You could have let those men take me. Ended this complication. Why didn't you? Lucian was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because you remind me of someone I failed to save a very long time ago. And because he met her gaze, and she saw something raw and ancient in those dark eyes. Because loneliness has a scent, Elena. It saturates your skin like rain. And I am weary of being the only one who carries it. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and unexpected. Elena's throat tightened. I don't know what I am anymore. The village thinks me dead. My old life is gone. I'm standing in a cottage with a vampire who saves strangers from snow and reads books about noble houses. A broken laugh escaped her. Nothing makes sense. No, Lucian agreed softly. But perhaps that's not entirely terrible. Outside, night was falling. And somewhere in the darkness, something howled a sound that was definitely not a wolf. Lucian's expression shifted instantly, every muscle tensing. We have company, he said. And this time, it's not from your village. Chapter 4. The rivals stay away from the windows. Lucian moved through the cottage with sudden, predatory purpose. He extinguished 2 of the 3 candles, plunging the room into near darkness. The fire remained, but he adjusted the logs so the flames burned lower, less visible from outside. Elena's pulse hammered in her throat. What's out there? Trouble. He pulled a long blade from beneath his coat. She hadn't even noticed he was armed. The metal gleamed with an odd, silvery sheen in the firelight. Older trouble than your village's hunting parties. Another howl split the night. Closer now. It raised every hair on Elena's arms. That's not a wolf, she whispered. No. Lucian positioned himself between her and the door, blade held with casual expertise. It's someone announcing their presence. Demanding acknowledgement. His jaw tightened. This is house politics. You shouldn't be here for this. Well, I am here. Elena fought to keep her voice steady. So you'd better explain quickly. Before he could answer, a voice called out from the darkness beyond the cottage, smooth, cultured, laced with amusement. Lucian Thorne. It's been decades. Surely you won't leave an old friend standing in the cold? Lucian's expression turned to stone. He's no friend. Then what is he? A reminder of everything I left behind. He didn't move, didn't lower his weapon. House Corvus, one of the 4 ruling families. They control the eastern territories, enforce the blood laws, and occasionally decide to remind lesser vampires of their place. The voice came again, closer. I can hear you in there, Lucian. I can hear both of you. How fascinating. The reclusive Thorn has taken a human pet. Elena flinched at the word. Lucian's knuckles whitened on his blade. She's not a pet, he called back, voice cold as winter stone. She's under my protection, which you will respect, Damien, unless you want to test whether I've grown soft in my solitude. Silence. Then laughter, rich, genuine, dangerous. Protection. How quaint. A pause. I'm coming to the door, Lucian. I'm not here to fight. I have information you need. Information can be shouted through walls. Not this kind. The voice dropped, lost its playful edge. There's a hunt, old friend. And whether you like it or not, you're part of it. Lucian stood rigid, clearly weighing options. Finally, he glanced back at Elena. Go to the bedroom. Lock the door. Don't come out unless I call for you. I'm not hiding while this isn't negotiable. His eyes flashed with something inhuman. If this goes badly, you need to be behind a locked door. Vampires require invitation to enter a dwelling, but that only applies to the primary residence. The bedroom offers you one more barrier. Elena wanted to argue, but the intensity in his gaze stopped her. She nodded and moved quickly to the bedroom, closing the door and sliding the heavy iron bolt into place. Through the wood, she heard Lucian cross to the cottage entrance. You may enter, he said formally, but you come in peace, or you don't leave at all. So dramatic. The front door opened with a creak. Some things never change. Elena pressed her ear to the bedroom door, heart racing. State your business, Damien. Lucian's voice was tight with controlled aggression. Then leave my territory. Your territory? Amusement colored the words. This cottage? This tiny patch of forest? Oh, Lucian. This is why the houses pity you. You were one of the most promising of our generation, and you've reduced yourself to this. I chose peace over power. Some would call that wisdom, and some would call it cowardice. A pause, footsteps moving across the wooden floor. But I'm not here to debate your life choices. I'm here because House Ravencroft has issued a blood hunt. The temperature in the cottage seemed to drop. For whom? Lucian's voice had gone deadly quiet. A rogue who's been feeding recklessly through the border territories, leaving bodies, drawing attention from human authorities, breaking every law we've established to keep ourselves hidden. Damien's tone hardened. The hunt was authorized 3 nights ago. Full tribunal. Whoever brings in the rogue gains considerable favor with the council. And this concerns me how? Because the rogue's kills form a pattern, Lucian. They're circling this area, getting closer to your little sanctuary. A dark laugh. Which means either you're harboring the rogue, or you're about to become very interesting to whoever's doing this. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. The girl 3 winters ago. The bodies. She thought of Lucian's careful words. Not all of us follow the rules. I'm harboring no one, Lucian said coldly. This is my land. I've made no kills in this territory for years. I believe you. But will the hunting parties? Damien's voice grew closer to where Elena stood hidden. And speaking of harboring, that's quite a delicate heartbeat I'm hearing. Young, female, frightened. A pause, heavy with implication. Is she dinner, Lucian? Or have you developed more complicated tastes? Touch her and die. The words came out flat, absolute. Elena shivered at the lethal certainty in them. Protective. Interesting. Damien sounded genuinely intrigued. Now, you know what the council will think when they learn you're keeping a human alive in your dwelling. They'll assume you're building a blood thrall, conditioning her for long-term feeding. Then let them assume. She'll be gone before any hunters arrive. Will she? Damien's voice dropped to something almost gentle. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've grown attached. And attachment is dangerous in times like these. Silence stretched. Elena could barely breathe. Here's what's going to happen. Damien continued. All business now. I'll report that I checked this territory and found nothing suspicious. That buys you perhaps a week before other hunters arrive. Use that time wisely. Either eliminate the rogue yourself and claim the bounty, or get your human far away from here before the bloodshed starts. Why help me? Because despite everything, I remember when you were different. When you cared about more than exile and solitude. Footsteps moved toward the door. And because I'm curious to see what you'll choose, the safety of obscurity, or something worth fighting for. The door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. One more thing, Damien called back. The rogue isn't working alone. There are signs of coordination, planning. Someone's orchestrating these kills, Lucian. And whoever they are, they want the houses mobilized. They want chaos. Who? If I knew that, I'd already be collecting my reward. A pause. Watch yourself, old friend. And watch your human. Because when the hunters come, they won't care about your noble intentions. They'll only see a threat. Then he was gone. Leaving only the sound of wind and the settling of disturbed snow. Lucian stood silent for a long moment before speaking. You can come out now. Elena. She unlocked the door with shaking hands. Lucian remained by the entrance, staring into the darkness beyond. You heard? He said quietly. Most of it. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. There's a killer. And hunters coming. And you're caught in the middle. We're caught in the middle. He turned to face her, and she saw weariness etched into every line of his face. I need to leave. Hunt this rogue before others arrive. But I can't leave you here unprotected. Then I'll come with you. Absolutely not. You don't have a choice. Elena moved closer, surprised by her own certainty. If I stay here alone, I'm vulnerable. If you take me back to the village, they think I'm dead. Returning would raise questions you can't afford. And if these hunters find me here, they'll assume exactly what Damien said. Lucian stared at her, clearly torn. I can help, Elena pressed. I'm human. I can move during daylight, search places you can't. And I'm already involved, whether you like it or not. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. She held his gaze. But do it while we prepare. Because time is running out. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of snow and something else, something that smelled of copper and death. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5. Blood laws and broken trust. Lucian paced the cottage like a caged predator, his supernatural stillness abandoned. Elena watched him from the table, waiting. She'd learned in the past hour that silence served her better than questions when he was working through something. Finally, he stopped. If you're coming with me, you need to understand what we're hunting. What I am. He met her eyes. And you need to know the laws that govern my kind, because breaking them will get us both killed. I'm listening. He pulled out the chair across from her, sat with deliberate care. In the firelight, his inhuman nature was impossible to ignore the too-perfect features. The absolute stillness of his chest, the way his eyes caught the flames and reflected them like mirrors. There are 4 great houses, he began. Corvus, Ravencroft, Blackthorn, and Silvermere. Each controls territory, enforces the blood laws, and maintains the council that governs all vampires in these lands. He gestured toward the forest. This area falls under Ravencroft jurisdiction, though it's remote enough that they largely ignore it. That's why I chose it. You're hiding from them. I'm existing outside their politics, a distinction that clearly mattered to him. I was born into House Thorn, a minor family sworn to Ravencroft. I served them for decades before I disagreed with their methods. Elena leaned forward. What methods? The houses maintain power through fear and spectacle. Public executions. Blood oaths that bind lesser vampires into servitude. The conditioning of humans into thralls willing blood sources so addicted to the bite that they'll do anything for it. His voice hardened. I watched them destroy families, manipulate entire towns, treat human lives as nothing more than resources to be managed. So you left. I renounced my house TIs and claimed exile. The council permitted it because I was useful enough to have earned that courtesy. But exile comes with conditions. He ticked them off on his fingers. No creating new vampires. No killing humans in my territory. No interfering with house business. And absolutely no harboring rogues, which is exactly what they'll accuse you of if they find me here. Yes, Lucian's jaw tightened. But there's more you need to know. Vampires cannot feed on unwilling victims. It's physically possible. But the blood tastes of fear and pain, and it slowly drives us mad. We need consent, or at least acceptance. That's why thralls exist. Elena processed this. The girl who died 3 winters ago. She didn't consent. No. Which means whoever killed her either doesn't care about the madness, or has found a way around it. He stood, moved to the window. That's what makes this rogue so dangerous. They're breaking the most fundamental law, and they're doing it repeatedly. That suggests either complete insanity or something worse. What's worse than insanity? Purpose. He turned back to her. What if the kills aren't about feeding? What if they're designed to draw the houses here? To create chaos in the territories? Elena's mind raced. Damien said someone was orchestrating this. Exactly. And if that's true, we're not just hunting a mad vampire. We're walking into a trap meant for much larger prey. The weight of it settled over Elena like a shroud. She should have been terrified. Should have demanded he take her somewhere safe, anywhere but here. Instead, she found herself asking, how do we find them? Lucian studied her with something like wonder. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, Elena corrected. But fear hasn't served me well lately. It kept me in a village that despised me, almost married to a man who found me shameful. If I'm going to be afraid, I'd rather it be of something real. Something I can fight. You can't fight a vampire, Elena. No, but I can help you find one. She stood, moved to where he stood by the window. You said you need consent to feed. That means the rogue needs to interact with victims, convince them somehow. And humans talk. If there have been other deaths, other strange occurrences, people will have noticed. The villages wouldn't tell me anything. They'd run screaming. They'd run from a vampire. Elena met his gaze. But I'm human. I can ask questions, listen to gossip. I can be your eyes during daylight when she hesitated. Where do you go during the day? I don't burst into flames if that's what you're asking. A ghost of dark humor touched his expression. But sunlight is painful, draining. I become weak, slow. I sleep deeply because consciousness itself becomes difficult to maintain. So you're vulnerable, completely. The admission hung between them, intimate and dangerous. He was trusting her with knowledge that could destroy him. Show me, Elena said quietly. Lucian's eyes widened. What? Your nature. Whatever you're hiding. She gestured toward the shadowed corners of the cottage. You've told me what you are. Now show me. Because if we're going to hunt together, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It was nothing like a human smile. His canines extended, sliding down into sharp, predatory points. His eyes darkened until they were completely black, reflective and alien. The veins beneath his pale skin became visible, tracing dark patterns across his face and throat. He looked monstrous, beautiful, terrifying. Elena's breath caught, but she forced herself to hold still, to keep looking. This is what I am, Lucian said, voice slightly distorted by the fangs. This is what hungers, what kills. When control slips, he took a step closer. Still want to help me? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But she thought of Marcus's contempt, her grandmother's warnings, the village's whispers. She thought of lying in the snow, ready to die, because she had nowhere left to go. Yes, she said, voice steady despite her fear. Because that's honest. You're not pretending to be something you're not. You're not hiding cruelty behind propriety. She swallowed hard. I'll take a monster who tells the truth over a man who lies about his nature any day. Lucian's inhuman features softened. Slowly, the fangs retracted. His eyes returned to their normal dark brown. The veins faded beneath his skin. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "And I don't know if that makes you very brave or very foolish. Can it be both?" A real smile this time, small but genuine. "I suppose it can." He moved to the trunk Elena had noticed earlier, pulling a key from his pocket. Inside, she glimpsed weapons blades like the one he carried, stakes carved from dark wood, vials of liquid that glowed faintly silver. "If we're doing this, we do it properly." He selected items carefully. "We'll start at the nearest village tomorrow. You'll ask about strange debts, travelers passing through, anyone new or unusual. I'll search at night, track any blood scent I can find, and if we find the rogue, then we stop them permanently." His expression hardened. "But Elena, you need to understand, if this goes wrong, if the houses arrive before we succeed, I won't be able to protect you from them. They'll see you as evidence of my crimes, then we won't let them catch us." Lucian handed her a small blade, silver and wickedly sharp. "Keep this on you. Silver won't kill a vampire, but it burns us, slows us down. If anyone attacks and I'm not there to protect you, go for the eyes. Then run." Elena took the weapon, tested its weight. It felt solid, real. "Lucian, why are you really doing this? You could leave me in some distant village and hunt alone. It would be safer for you." He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Because I've spent decades in exile," he finally said. "Decades convincing myself that isolation was peace. That if I stayed apart from both humans and vampires, I could escape the violence, the politics, the pain." He looked at her. "But you were dying in the snow, and I couldn't walk away. And now you're standing here, choosing to face monsters when you could be safe. And I realize, I don't want to be alone anymore." The confession settled between them, raw and vulnerable. "Neither do I," Elena whispered. Outside, the night deepened. And somewhere in the darkness, the rogue was hunting. Tomorrow, they would hunt back. Chapter 6. The village of Whisperstye left at first light. While mist still clung to the frozen ground, Elena wore the borrowed dress and a heavy cloak Lucian had produced from the trunk, dark wool lined with fur, far finer than anything she'd owned in her previous life. He'd given her a leather satchel containing bread, dried meat, and the silver blade wrapped carefully in cloth. "The village is called Millbrook," Lucian said, as they walked. 2 hours southeast. Small, isolated, devout. They've had 3 deaths in the past 2 months. That the local priest attributed to winter fever. But, you don't think it was fever. Winter fever doesn't drain bodies of blood. He moved through the forest with predatory ease, never disturbing the snow. Despite his speed, Elena struggled to keep pace. "I scouted there a week ago. The deaths follow a pattern, young women, all found in their beds, all with marks on their throats that the families tried to hide." Elena's stomach turned. "Why hide the marks?" "Because vampire attacks bring shame. Villages believe the victims must have invited it somehow, been too willing, too sinful." His voice went cold. "It's easier to blame the dead than face the truth." They walked in silence for a while, Elena's breath forming clouds in the frigid air, while Lucian showed no signs of breathing at all. The sun climbed higher, and she noticed him wince slightly, his movements becoming marginally less fluid. "The light hurts you," she observed. "It's manageable. For now." He pulled his hood up, shadowing his face. "But I'll need to rest before nightfall. There's an abandoned mill on the outskirts of Millbrook. I'll wait there while you enter the village." "What exactly am I looking for?" "Strangers. Anyone new who arrived before the deaths started. Anyone who asks too many questions about the victims." He handed her a small purse of coins. "Buy supplies. Linger in the market. Listen to gossip. People talk freely around those they think are harmless." Elena weighed the purse. "Where did you get money?" "I'm 243 years old, Elena. I've had time to accumulate resources." A pause. "Most of what I own is in various banks under names that no longer exist. But I keep some coin available for necessities." 243 years. The number staggered her. "You don't look a day over 30. I was 28 when I was turned." "That was in 1582, he said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "I've seen empires rise and fall. Watched villages grow into cities. Buried everyone I once loved." The loneliness in those words made Elena's chest ache. "Is that why you live alone? Because everyone you care about dies?" "Partly." Lucian stepped over a fallen log, offered her his hand to help her across. His skin was cold, but his grip was steady. But also because caring for someone when you're immortal means watching them wither while you remain unchanged. It means making impossible choices about whether to turn them, condemn them to your existence, or let them go. Elena didn't release his hand immediately. Have you ever turned someone? Once. The word came out tight. A mistake I've regretted for over a century. Before she could ask more, he pulled away, pointing through the trees. There, Millbrook. The village appeared through the mist, perhaps 40 buildings clustered around a central church, smoke rising from chimneys, the distant sound of a blacksmith's hammer. Smaller than Elena's home village, more remote. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. The abandoned mill sat at the forest's edge, its water wool frozen and still. Lucian led her inside, where darkness and decay made the space feel like a tomb. I'll be here until sunset, he said, already moving to the darkest corner. If you're not back by then, I'll come looking, and if something goes wrong, he pressed something into her hand, a small silver whistle on a leather cord. Blow this. I'll hear it and come, regardless of the daylight. Cost. Elena studied his face, noting the strain already showing around his eyes. The sunlight had weakened him more than he wanted to admit. Rest. I'll be careful. She left him there in the shadows and made her way to Millbrook alone. The village market was modest, a few stalls selling winter vegetables, preserved goods, rough cloth. Elena wandered slowly, projecting an air of humble need. She bought bread from a woman with suspicious eyes, cheese from a merchant who barely looked at her. Then she heard it. Two women talking near the well. Found her just like the others. Pale as death, those marks on her neck. Hush. The priest said we're not to speak of it. The priest can say what he likes. My sister is dead, and I want to know why. Elena drifted closer, pretending to examine a basket of withered apples. The younger woman, barely 20, with red-rimmed eyes, spoke in a fierce whisper. Sarah was healthy, strong. She doesn't just die in her sleep. And those marks, the fever causes strange symptoms, the older woman said, but her voice lacked conviction. It wasn't fever. The younger woman's hands clenched. There was a man, a stranger. He came to the village a month ago, asking about lodging. Sarah mentioned him, said he had kind eyes, that he seemed lonely. Elena's pulse quickened. Excuse me, she said softly, approaching the women. I couldn't help overhearing. I'm traveling through, looking for my brother. He went missing some weeks ago. Tall, dark hair, in his 30s? The younger woman turned, grief making her eyes fierce. I haven't seen anyone matching that description. But the stranger I mentioned, he had fair hair, handsome, spoke like a gentleman, though his clothes were travel-worn. Did he give a name? Called himself Mr. Ashford. Said he was a merchant surveying new routes. She wiped at her eyes. Sarah talked to him several times. The night before she died, I saw them walking together near the church. The older woman grabbed the younger one's arm. Margaret, you shouldn't gossip with strangers. She's not gossiping, Elena said gently. She's mourning. And trying to understand. She met Margaret's eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. Where is this Mr. Ashford now? Gone. Left 2 days after Sarah's death. Margaret's voice broke. No one even questioned him. The priest said Sarah died of natural causes, and everyone just accepted it. Where was he staying? The old Hendricks house, at the north edge of the village. The family moved to the city last year, left it empty. Margaret studied Elena with sudden intensity. Why are you asking all this? What's your brother got to do with Sarah? Elena made her decision quickly. My brother was hunting something dangerous. Something that preys on young women. I think your Mr. Ashford might be what he was looking for. The older woman gasped. You speak of demons, I speak of evil men who hide behind kind faces. Elena touched Margaret's hand briefly. If he returns, don't approach him. Send word to the church in the neighboring village. Ask for Father Benedict. Tell him a traveler sent you. It was a lie, but a useful one. Margaret nodded slowly, something like hope flickering in her grief-stricken face. Elena left them and made her way to the Hendricks house. It stood isolated, shutters closed, snow undisturbed around the entrance. Elena circled it carefully, noting details Lucian would want to know. A window at the back had been forced open. Inside, through the gap, she could see an overturned chair. Scattered belongings, someone had left in a hurry. She was about to turn away when she noticed a scrap of paper caught on a nail near the broken window. Elena pulled it free, her breath catching as she read the elegant script. House Silvermere demands tribute. 3 more by the new moon, or the compact is broken. Her hands trembled. This wasn't a rogue acting alone. This was organized, sanctioned. One of the great houses was orchestrating the killings. Elena shoved the paper into her satchel and ran. She had to get back to Lucian, had to tell him that everything they thought they knew was wrong. She was halfway to the mill when she realized someone was following her, a man's silhouette against the afternoon sun, moving with purpose through the snow, not running, but closing distance steadily. Elena's hand went to the silver blade beneath her cloak. "Miss." The voice called out, "Please wait." She turned, heart hammering. It was a young man, perhaps 18, dressed in rough village clothes. His face was earnest, worried. "I heard you asking about Mr. Ashford," he said, breathing hard. "I know where he went. But if I tell you, you have to promise me something." Elena's mind raced. "What?" "Find him. Stop him." The young man's voice cracked. "He took my sister. Not killed, took. She's been missing for 3 days. Please, whatever he is, whatever you're hunting, just bring her back." Elena looked into his desperate eyes and saw her own grief reflected there. "I'll try," she whispered. "I swear I'll try." Where did he go? North, toward the old monastery ruins. He was asking about them before he left, about whether anyone lived there. The monastery. Remote, abandoned, perfect for hiding. "Thank you," Elena said. "What's your sister's name?" "Anna. Anna Thorne." The surname hit Elena like a blow. She stared at the young man. "Thorne? It's common enough in these parts." He shrugged, oblivious to her shock. "Our family's been here for generations." Lucian's family. His bloodline, still living in these villages, completely unaware that their legendary ancestor walked among them. "I'll find her," Elena promised again, then turned and ran for the mill. Lucian was waiting, already sensing something wrong. He emerged from the shadows as she burst through the door. "We have a problem," Elena gasped, pulling out the paper. A big one. He read it, his face going absolutely still. Chapter 7. Blood Oaths and Betrayal. Lucian stared at the paper in Elena's hands as if it were a serpent poised to strike. Silvermere. He spoke the name like a curse. Of all the houses, it had to be them. Elena watched darkness bleed into his expression, not the predatory shift she'd seen before, but something deeper, older. "You know them. I was betrothed to Silvermere's daughter. 2 centuries ago." He moved to the mill's broken window, staring toward the distant monastery. "The alliance was supposed to unite our houses, strengthen Ravencroft's hold on these territories. But I discovered what they truly were. What they did to maintain their power. What did they do? They cultivated rogues. Deliberately drove lesser vampires mad through torture and blood deprivation, then released them into disputed territories." His hands clenched. The chaos that followed gave Silvermere excuse to intervene, to expand their influence under the guise of maintaining order. They built an empire on manufactured crisis. Elena's stomach turned. "And when you found out?" "I refused the marriage. Exposed their methods to the council." His laugh was bitter. House Silvermere lost considerable standing. The betrothal was dissolved, and I made enemies powerful enough that exile became my only option. So this is revenge. Elena held up the paper. "They're creating incidents in your territory to force you out of hiding or frame you for the deaths. Both, probably. If hunters find evidence of kills near my cottage, they'll assume I've broken my exile terms. The council will sanction my execution." Lucian turned to face her. "But taking in a thorn, that's personal. That's a message. Because she's your bloodline. They're showing me they can reach my descendants. That my family name still has value as a target." His eyes flashed with barely controlled rage. "They want me to come for her. They're counting on it." Elena processed this, her mind working through implications. "Then we don't give them what they expect. We don't walk into their trap. There's a girl's life at stake, I know." Elena cut him off. "Which is exactly why we need to be smart about this. They want you angry, reckless, easy to capture or kill. So we go in careful. We plan." Lucian studied her with something like admiration. "You're thinking tactically. I'm thinking like someone who's been trapped before." She moved to stand beside him at the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. "Marcus didn't publicly reject me on a whim. He planned it, chose the moment for maximum humiliation, made sure I had nowhere to turn." Her voice hardened. "I won't be outmaneuvered again. What do you suggest?" Elena pulled out the small map Lucian had shown her earlier, spreading it across a dusty work table. The monastery is here, correct? About 3 hours north? Yes. Old stone structure, mostly collapsed. Catacombs beneath that could hide a dozen vampires, which means going in blind gets us killed. Elena traced possible routes with her finger. But they're expecting you. They're not expecting me. Absolutely not. Listen. She met his gaze steadily. I'm human. Daylight doesn't weaken me. I can scout the monastery while you're still recovering from the sun exposure. Find out how many vampires are there, where they're keeping Anna, what defenses they've set, and if they catch you, then I'm just a lost traveler seeking shelter. They have no reason to know I'm connected to you. Elena leaned forward. But if you charge in alone at night, they'll be ready. This only works if we divide their attention. Lucian was silent for a long moment, clearly warring with himself. You're asking me to let you walk into a nest of vampires who are actively trying to draw me out, to use you as bait. I'm offering to be your eyes where you can't go. There's a difference. Not enough of one, but she could see him considering it, running scenarios. If we do this and I'm not agreeing yet, you'd need protections. Silver, holy water, anything that might slow them down if things go wrong. Do you have holy water? No, but we can improvise. He moved to his pack, pulling out vials and pouches. Silver dust mixed with alcohol burns vampire skin on contact. Not enough to kill, but enough to create distraction. And this, he held up a small amulet, tarnished with age. Belonged to my mother. It's blessed, or was once. Might offer some protection. Elena took the amulet, feeling the weight of history in the worn metal. Your mother was human? Yes. She was turned to save her life after an accident. My father gave her the choice, death or immortality. Lucian's expression softened fractionally. She chose immortality, but she never fully accepted what she'd become. This amulet was from her mortal life. She wore it until the day she walked into sunlight and ended her existence. The tragedy in those words hung heavy between them. Elena closed her fingers around the amulet. I'll keep it safe. You'd better. He turned away, clearly struggling with emotion. Because if something happens to you in that monastery, if they hurt you to draw me out, then you don't come. Elena's voice was firm. You let them think their plan failed. You disappear into the forest like you've done for decades. You survive. I couldn't. You could. You would. Because that's what survival means. She moved closer, placed a hand on his arm. His skin was cool through the fabric of his sleeve. But it won't come to that. I'll be careful. I'll scout and leave. Then we plan the actual rescue together. Lucian covered her hand with his own, the gesture surprisingly gentle. Why are you doing this? You could walk away. Find a new village. Start over. This isn't your fight, isn't it? Elena met his dark eyes. You saved me from freezing to death. You've given me shelter, truth, purpose. And that girl they took in us, she's just living her life, unaware that her ancestors' enemies are using her as a pawn. She squeezed his arm. I know what it's like to be collateral damage in someone else's war. I won't let that happen to her if I can prevent it. Understanding flickered across Lucian's face. You're still angry. About Marcus. About how your village treated you. Furious, Elena admitted. But I'm channeling it into something useful. Into helping someone who actually needs it. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're extraordinary. And terrifying. And I still think this plan is reckless. Good thing I don't need your permission. No, he agreed quietly. You don't. But you have my support. And my weapons. He began assembling supplies, the silver dust mixture, the amulet, a small crossbow he'd apparently been saving. We leave at dawn. I'll get you as close to the monastery as I can before the sun becomes unbearable. You'll have until midday to scout and return. And if I'm not back by midday, then I come for you. Consequences be damned. His voice left no room for argument. This is my one condition, Elena. You scout. You gather information. But if you're captured, I will tear that monastery apart stone by stone. The fierce protectiveness in his words sent warmth through her chest. Understood. They spent the remaining daylight preparing. Lucian taught her how to load and fire the crossbow, how to recognize different vampire houses by their particular marks and sigils. He explained the catacombs' likely layout, based on similar structures he'd seen over his long life. As night fell completely, Elena noticed him growing stronger, more fluid in his movements. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver light through the mill's broken roof. I need to feed, Lucian said abruptly, not meeting her eyes. Before tomorrow. I'll be weaker otherwise, less able to protect you if needed. Elena's pulse quickened. How do you usually? I hunt animals. Deer, mostly. It's not ideal. Animal blood lacks the potency of human, but it's sufficient. He finally looked at her. Unless you're offering. The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Would it help? Elena asked quietly. For tomorrow. Would my blood make you stronger? Lucian's eyes darkened, pupils dilating. Yes, considerably, but I won't ask that of you. You didn't ask. I offered. Elena pushed up her sleeve, exposing her wrist. Her hand trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. If it increases our chances of saving Anna. If it means you're strong enough to fight whoever's waiting in that monastery, take what you need. Elena, I trust you. The words surprised her with their truth. I've seen what you are. I know what you're capable of. And I still trust you not to hurt me. Lucian remained motionless for a heartbeat, too. Then slowly, he crossed to her. He took her wrist in his cool hands, cradling it with unexpected tenderness. This will hurt, he warned, but only for a moment. Then it will feel different, pleasant even. That's part of how we feed. The venom causes euphoria, makes victims willing. I'm already willing. His thumb traced the pulse point at her wrist. If you want me to stop, say so. I'll stop immediately. Do you understand? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Lucian's fangs extended. In the moonlight, they gleamed like pearl. He lowered his head to her wrist, and Elena felt the sharp pressure of his bite, pain, bright and sudden. Then warmth spreading up her arm, turning to liquid pleasure that made her knees weak. She gasped, would have fallen if Lucian hadn't steadied her with his free hand. The world tilted, colors intensifying. She could feel her heartbeat synchronizing with his pull, feel the connection forming between them, intimate, terrifying, perfect. Then it ended. Lucian pulled away, his eyes completely black now, blood staining his lips. He looked wild, dangerous, beautiful. Chapter 8. The monastery runes. Dawn came cold and pale, washing the world in shades of gray. Elena woke to find Lucian standing at the mill's entrance, silhouetted against the rising sun. He flinched slightly as the first rays touched his face, but held his ground with stubborn determination. You should be resting, she said, sitting up. Her wrist throbbed beneath the bandage, a dull ache that somehow felt intimate. I will. Once you're on your way. He didn't turn to look at her. The monastery is 3 hours north. Follow the frozen creek bed until you reach the oak with the split trunk, then head northwest. You'll see the ruins on the hilltop. Elena gathered her supplies, checking each item methodically. Crossbow, silver dust, vials, the amulet around her neck, a small knife, bread and water. She looked capable, prepared. She felt terrified. Remember, Lucian continued, his voice strained from the growing sunlight, you're scouting only. Count the vampires. Note Anna's location, find escape routes. Then return here by midday. I know the plan, and if anyone asks who you are, I'm a traveler seeking shelter after my horse went lame. I'm lost and grateful for any kindness. Elena recited it like a litany. I won't mention you. I won't do anything to suggest I'm connected to you. Finally, he turned. The sunlight clearly pained him. His skin had taken on an almost translucent quality, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. But his gaze remained sharp, concerned. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Elena approached him, staying in the shadow so her presence wouldn't force him further into the painful light. Because that girl is innocent. And because I'm tired of being powerless. Something flickered in his expression, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. You were never powerless, Elena. Just trapped in circumstances that made you believe you were. The words settled warm in her chest. She reached up, touched his cool cheek briefly. Stay safe. Rest. I'll be back before you know it. Then she left. Before her courage could fail, the forest was eerily quiet as Elena followed the frozen creek. Her breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Occasionally, she heard movement in the underbrush animals. She hoped, though after everything she'd learned, she couldn't be certain. The oak with the split trunk appeared exactly where Lucian had described. Elena turned northwest, climbing steadily as the ground rose toward the hilltop. The monastery emerged from the morning mist like a corpse rising from a grave. Stone walls, half collapsed. A bell tower that listed dangerously to one side. Arched windows that gapped like empty eye sockets. Dead vines covered everything, skeletal and dark against the gray stone. It should have been completely abandoned, but smoke rose from somewhere within the ruins. Elena circled wide, approaching from the east, where the walls had crumbled lowest. She moved carefully, testing each step. Aware that a single sound could alert whatever waited inside, voices reached her low, conversational, unmistakably human in cadence, but with that particular quality she'd learned to recognize. Vampires speaking to each other with the casual ease of predators in their den. She crept closer, finding a gap in the wall where she could peer through without being seen. The monastery's interior courtyard had been partially cleared. A fire burned in a makeshift pit for light and warmth, Elena realized, not for the vampire's benefit, for their prisoner, and a thorn sat near the fire, wrapped in a heavy blanket. She looked unharmed, but terrified, her eyes darting between her captors. 3 vampires stood around her in a loose circle, engaged in some discussion Elena couldn't quite hear. And oh wait, 4 vampires. A figure emerged from the shadows of what had been the chapel, tall, elegant, wearing fine clothes despite the ruined surroundings. When he stepped into the firelight, Elena's breath caught. Beautiful didn't begin to describe him. He looked like something carved from marble and moonlight, with silver white hair and features so perfect they seemed almost artificial. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Lord Silvermere, one of the other vampires said, bowing slightly. Should we prepare for the Thorn's arrival? So this was the head of House Silvermere himself. Elena's hand tightened on the crossbow, though she knew it would be useless against someone that powerful. Lucian will come, Lord Silvermere said, his voice cultured and cold. He's predictable in his sentimentality. Family has always been his weakness, even after centuries of exile. He circled Anna like a predator examining prey. The girl doesn't even know what she is. What power flows through her veins? Anna whimpered, pulling the blanket tighter. Please, she whispered. I don't understand any of this. I just want to go home. Home. Silvermere laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. Child, your ancestor abandoned his home, turned his back on power on purpose, to hide in the forest like a frightened animal. But bloodlines remember, and yours calls to us, sings of potential wasted. One of the other vampires, a woman with dark hair and cruel eyes, spoke up. My lord, what if Thorn doesn't take the bait? What if his exile has made him truly indifferent to his mortal descendants? Then we'll have to provide additional motivation. Silvermere gestured, and another vampire emerged from the chapel, dragging someone behind him. Elena's heart stopped. It was the young man from the village, Anna's brother. He struggled weakly against his captor, clearly already injured, Thomas. Anna tried to stand, but the vampires forced her down. Let him go, please. He's done nothing. Precisely. Silvermere's smile was terrible. To Thorns, 2 pieces of leverage. And if their distant ancestor still refuses to show, he produced a blade, silver and wickedly curved. Well, we'll simply ensure the Thorn bloodline ends here tonight. Either way, I win. Elena's mind raced. This was worse than she'd anticipated. Not just Anna, but her brother too. And Silvermere wasn't just trying to draw Lucian out, he was planning to eliminate Lucian's entire mortal family line out of spite. She needed to get back to the mill, needed to warn Lucian. But as she started to retreat, her foot came down on a loose stone. The sound was tiny, insignificant, but vampire hearing was supernatural. Every head in the courtyard turned toward her hiding place. Well, Silvermere said, his voice carrying perfectly across the distance. It seems we have a visitor. How delightful. Elena ran. She heard them behind her, impossibly fast, inhumanly graceful. The forest that had seemed quiet before now exploded with movement. She zigzagged between trees, fumbled for one of the silver dust vials, threw it behind her without looking, a hiss of pain, a curse in a language she didn't recognize. But they were still coming. Elena's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. The crossbow bounced against her back, useless at this speed. She was going to die here, and Lucian would walk into a trap without knowing. Something grabbed her from the side, yanking her behind a massive oak. A hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. Silent, a male voice hissed in her ear. Or we both die. Elena froze. The voice wasn't Lucian's, but it also wasn't hostile. Urgent, yes, but not threatening. Her pursuer released her slowly. She turned to find a vampire, young-looking, perhaps 20 in appearance, with auburn hair and amber eyes that caught the morning light strangely. No time. He pressed something into her hand, a small wooden token carved with intricate symbols. Give this to Lucian Thorn. Tell him Kieran Ashwood sends warning. Silvermere has allied with House Blackthorn. This isn't just revenge. It's a coup attempt against the council itself. I don't understand. You will. But only if you survive to tell him. Kieran glanced over his shoulder, clearly hearing something Elena couldn't. They're circling back. I'll lead them east, away from your path. Run south, not north. There's a hunting cabin 2 miles that way. Hide there until nightfall. Why are you helping me? Because I'm tired of watching houses destroy innocence to settle old scores. His amber eyes met hers, and she saw genuine regret there. And because Lucian Thorne was right, all those years ago, to walk away from this madness. Now go. He was gone before Elena could respond, moving through the trees with a vampire's speed. She heard him call out in the distance a taunt, a challenge drawing the pursuit away from her. Elena ran south, clutching the wooden token, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd failed. She'd been discovered. But she'd also learned something Lucian needed to know. This conspiracy went deeper than simple revenge, and somewhere in these woods, there were vampires who didn't agree with their house's methods. Vampires who might be allies, if she could just survive long enough to find them. The hunting cabin appeared through the tree's small ramshackle, but blessedly empty. Elena threw herself inside, barred the door, and collapsed against the wall. Her wrist throbbed where Lucian had bitten her. The amulet was warm against her skin, and outside, the forest held its breath, waiting for nightfall. Chapter 9. Nightfall and Revelation. Selena watched the light fade through the cabin's grimy window, each passing minute stretching like an eternity. Midday had come and gone hours ago. Lucian would know something had gone wrong. He'd be searching for her, weakened by sunlight, but driven by the same stubborn protectiveness that had made him save her from the snow. She hoped he was smart enough to wait for nightfall. Hoped he wouldn't do anything reckless on her behalf. The hunting cabin was barely more than 4 walls and a roof. A single room, abandoned hunting equipment gathering dust in the corners, a fireplace filled with old ash. Elena didn't dare light a fire. She sat in the growing darkness, crossbow across her lap, replaying everything she'd witnessed. Lord Silvermere, 2 prisoners, an alliance with House Blackthorn, and Kieran Ashwood, a vampire who'd risked himself to help her escape. Nothing made sense anymore. Elena pulled out the wooden token he'd given her, examining it in the dying light. The carved symbols were intricate, deliberate, some kind of code or identification, though she couldn't decipher it. She tucked it safely into her inner pocket, along with the note she'd found at the Hendricks house, evidence. Pieces of a puzzle Lucian would need to solve. Shadows deepened. Elena's exhaustion fought with her fear, her body demanding rest while her mind raced with scenarios. What if Lucian didn't find her? What if the vampires tracked her here? What if Anna and her brother were already dead? A soft sound outside froze her thoughts. Footsteps. Light. Careful. Circling the cabin, Elena raised the crossbow with shaking hands, aiming at the door. The silver dust vials were within reach. The knife pressed against her hip. She was as ready as she'd ever be. The footsteps stopped at the door. Silence. Then a voice, low and achingly familiar. Elena, it's me. I'm alone. Relief flooded through her so intensely it hurt. Lucian, I'm coming in. Don't shoot me. The door opened slowly. Lucian stepped through, and Elena's breath caught. He looked haggard, strained in ways she hadn't seen before. His clothes were torn, scratches healing slowly across his face and hands. He'd fought his way here through daylight and whatever else the forest had thrown at him. You're hurt, Elena said, lowering the crossbow. I'm fine, but his voice was rough, exhausted. You're not. I can smell blood your wrist. You reopened the wound. Elena glanced down. The bandage had indeed darkened with fresh blood, though she didn't remember injuring it. Adrenaline had masked the pain. Lucian crossed to her in 3 swift strides, taking her arm with gentle insistence. His hands trembled slightly as he unwrapped the bandage, examined the wound. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. I tried to be careful. I tried. You're alive. He cut her off, his voice fierce. That's all that matters. When you didn't return by midday, I thought. He stopped, composed himself with visible effort. Tell me what happened. Elena explained everything. The monastery, the prisoners, Silvermere's plan, the discovery and chase, Kieran's intervention. Lucian listened with absolute focus, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, she pulled out the token and the note, placed them in his hands. Lucian stared at the token as if it had burned him. Ashwood, I know this family. They were minor vassals to House Ravencroft, but they disappeared decades ago. I thought they'd been eliminated in a purge, Kieran said. Silvermere has allied with Blackthorn. That this is about more than just revenge on you. A coup. Lucian's voice went hollow. They're trying to destabilize the council, create chaos that would allow them to seize control of all four houses. He looked up at her. You've stumbled into the middle of a vampire civil war, Elena, and they know you're connected to me now. Then we use that. Elena straightened, ignoring the pain in her wrist. They expect you to charge in alone, angry and reckless. We don't give them that. We find allies. Kieran clearly opposes Silvermere. There might be others. Or it's a trap within a trap. Maybe. Elena met his gaze steadily. But we don't have many options. Anna and Thomas are still prisoners. Silvermere plans to kill them tonight to draw you out. If we do nothing, innocents die. Lucian was silent, clearly torn between caution and conscience. Finally, he stood, moved to the window. Full night had fallen, painting the world in shades of silver and shadow. There's something I haven't told you, he said quietly. About why I really left House Thorn, why exile was preferable to staying. Elena waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. The woman I was betrothed to, Silvermere's daughter, Isadora, she wasn't cruel by choice. She was broken by her father, molded into a weapon over centuries. When I tried to help her, to show her another way, Silvermere discovered it. His hands clenched. He killed her, his own daughter, made it look like suicide, claimed she was unstable. All to prove he wouldn't tolerate defection in his bloodline. The horror of it settled over Elena like ice. That's why he hates you. You tried to take her away from him. I tried to save her. And I failed. Lucian's voice cracked. I've spent 200 years in exile, telling myself I was preserving peace, honoring her memory by staying away from house politics. But maybe I was just hiding. Too afraid to face him again. Too broken by what he did to her. Elena crossed to him, placed her hand over his where it gripped the windowsill. You're not hiding now. No, he turned his hand to clasp hers. Because you're right. Running hasn't protected anyone. My mortal descendants are in danger. Silvermere is staging a coup that could plunge our entire society into war. And I'm the only one who knows his methods well enough to stop him. Not the only one. Elena squeezed his hand. We stop him. Together. A ghost of a smile touched Lucian's lips. You're mortal, wounded, exhausted, and you've already nearly been killed once today. Any sensible person would demand I take them far away from here. Good thing I've never been particularly sensible. No, he agreed softly. You're brave. Foolishly, extraordinarily brave. He lifted her bandaged wrist gently, pressed his cool lips to the cloth covering his own bite mark. The gesture was tender, possessive, full of unspoken meaning. Very well. We face this together. But we do it smart. What's the plan? Lucian released her hand, moved to examine the weapons and supplies she'd salvaged. First, we find Kieran Ashwood, confirm whether his offer of help is genuine. If it is, we learn everything he knows about Silvermere's alliance with Blackthorn, and if it's a trap, then we spring it on our terms instead of his. Lucian's expression hardened with predatory determination. I've survived 2 centuries by being careful, Elena, but I've also survived because, when necessary, I can be absolutely ruthless. Silvermere is about to remember why the council feared me enough to grant exile rather than risk execution. Elena felt something shift in the air between them, partnership solidifying into something deeper, more dangerous. They were no longer vampire and rescued human. They were conspirators, warriors, 2 wounded souls choosing to fight rather than hide. How do we find Kieran? She asked. The token. Lucian held it up to the moonlight streaming through the window. These symbols are coordinates, marked in old vampire script. He's telling me where to meet him. His eyes narrowed as he translated. The Whispering Glen, 2 miles west. Neutral ground that's been used for parley between houses for centuries. Could still be a trap, almost certainly is. Lucian turned to her, and she saw both fear and determination in his dark eyes. Which is why you're staying here, where it's safe? Absolutely not, Elena. He gripped her shoulders, gentle but firm. I can move faster alone, fight better without worrying about protecting you. And if this goes badly, someone needs to survive to warn the council about Silvermere's coup. The council that exiled you? That wouldn't lift a finger to help those prisoners? The council that, for all its flaws, maintains the laws preventing wholesale slaughter of humans. His voice softened. I need you safe, please. That's the only way I can do this. Elena wanted to argue. Wanted to insist on staying by his side, But she saw the logic beneath his protectiveness, saw how her presence would divide his focus. Fine, she conceded. But you take the crossbow, and you come back. Because if you die heroically saving your family name, I'm going to be very angry. Noted, he kissed her forehead quick, chaste, but waited with promise. Bar the door behind me. If anyone but me tries to enter, shoot first and ask questions later. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness like he'd been born to it. Elena barred the door and returned to her vigil by the window. The forest stretched endlessly before her, full of shadows and secrets and things that shouldn't exist. Somewhere out there, Lucian was walking into danger, and she could only wait, hope, and prepare for whatever morning would bring, if morning came at all. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. Whispering Glen earned its name from the way wind moved through the ancient trees, creating sounds like distant voices sharing secrets. Lucian approached cautiously, every sense alert. The glen was indeed neutral ground consecrated by old rituals that prevented vampire violence within its boundaries. But consecration could be broken, and after 2 centuries, he trusted nothing about house politics. Kieran Ashwood stood in the center of the clearing, moonlight turning his auburn hair silver. He was alone, as far as Lucian could tell, though that meant little when dealing with vampires. Lucian Thorne, Kieran inclined his head respectfully. I wondered if you'd come, or if exile had made you too cautious. Caution is why I've survived this long. Lucian stopped at the clearing's edge, maintaining distance. You helped the woman who's under my protection. That buys you a conversation. Nothing more. Fair enough. Kieran's amber eyes were steady, earnest. I'll speak plainly then. My family served Ravencroft for generations until Lord Silvermere orchestrated our downfall. He convinced the council my father was building unauthorized alliances, preparing rebellion. My entire family was executed. I escaped only because I was young enough to seem harmless. And now you've allied yourself with the man who destroyed your house? I've infiltrated his operation. Kieran's voice hardened. For 40 years, I've played the loyal vassal, earning his trust, learning his secrets, waiting for the moment when I could strike back. Lucian studied him, reading truth in the tension of his jaw, the old grief in his eyes. What's he planning? Exactly what your human discovered. Silvermere has convinced Lord Blackthorn that the council is weak, outdated. Together, they command nearly half the vampire population in these territories. If they move against Ravencroft and Corvus simultaneously, they could seize control within days. And the rogue killings? The manufactured crisis? Bait for you, yes. But also evidence of council failure. Kieran stepped closer. Silvermere will present your capture or death to the council as proof that exile doesn't work, that old laws need revision. Then, in the chaos of debate, he'll stage his coup. Blackthorn's forces will strike while the council is distracted. The scope of it staggered Lucian. When? 3 days. The new moon, when vampire power is strongest. Your descendants are just the opening. Move. Kieran pulled a rolled parchment from his coat. This is the attack plan. Troop movements, target locations, everything I've managed to document. Lucian took the parchment, but didn't unroll it, didn't take his eyes off Kieran. Why give this to me? Why not take it to Ravencroft yourself? Because I'm a ghost, Thorne. A survivor of a purged family. Ravencroft would assume I'm lying, seeking revenge through manipulation. Kieran's voice grew urgent. But you're legendary. The vampire who walked away from power on principle. The one who exposed Silvermere's methods once before. If you return to the council with this evidence, they'll listen. I'm exiled. I have no standing. Exile can be revoked in times of crisis. And this is a crisis. Kieran's eyes burned with intensity. You could stop a war, Thorne. Save thousands of lives, human and vampire, both. All you have to do is set aside your pride and ask the council for one more chance. The words struck deeper than Kieran knew. Pride. Was that what kept Lucian in exile? Or was it fear of failing again, of watching more innocents die while he stood powerless? There's another option, Lucian said quietly. I could kill Silvermere tonight. End this before it begins. You'd never reach him. He has a dozen guards at the monastery, all loyal unto death, and he's ancient, powerful. Even you couldn't defeat him alone. Kieran shook his head. But if you brought council forces, surrounded the monastery with legal authority behind you, then Anna and Thomas die while I waste time traveling to Ravencroft's seat and convincing politicians to act. They're already dead, Kieran said bluntly. Or they will be, the moment Silvermere decides you're not taking the bait. Your choice isn't between saving them and stopping the coup. It's between revenge that accomplishes nothing, or strategy that might save thousands. Lucian wanted to rage at the cold logic, wanted to reject the idea that his family's blood was an acceptable sacrifice for the greater good. But he'd lived too long, seen too much, to pretend Kieran was wrong. There's a third option, a new voice said from the trees. Both vampires spun. Elena stepped into the clearing, crossbow loaded, and aimed at Kieran. Behind her, 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Vampires Lucian recognized with a shock, Damien Corvus, and 2 of his house guards. I thought I told you to stay at the cabin, Lucian said, torn between fury and relief. You did. I ignored you. Elena kept her weapon steady. Because I realized something while you were gone. Kieran's plan requires you to abandon your family, to prove you're rational, strategic, worthy of the council's trust. But that's exactly what Silvermere expects, that you've changed, grown cold, become the kind of vampire who'd sacrifice mortals for political gain. Comprehension dawned. So if I save Anna and Thomas instead, you prove you haven't changed, that you're still the sentimental fool who chose exile over power. Elena lowered the crossbow slightly. Which makes you dangerous to Silvermere in a way the council never could be. Because you represent an alternative, a vampire who protects humans instead of exploiting them. Damien Corvus stepped forward, a slow smile spreading across his aristocratic features. The mortal thinks like a strategist. I'm impressed. How did you find us? Lucian demanded. I've been tracking Silvermere's movements for weeks. When I heard about the Thorn descendants being taken, I knew you'd surface eventually. Damien's expression turned serious. House Corvus has no love for Silvermere's ambitions. A coup would destabilize everything we've built. But we can't move openly without proof. I have proof. Kieran held up the parchment. Everything needed to bring charges before the council. Then why involve me? Lucian looked between them, seeing the shape of a larger plan. Because someone needs to rescue those prisoners, Damien said. And that cannot be me. Corvus forces acting without council authorization would trigger the very war we're trying to prevent. But an exiled vampire defending his mortal family? That's personal. Outside house jurisdiction. Understanding clicked into place. You want me to storm the monastery while you take Kieran's evidence to the council. Not just storm it. Survive it. With witnesses. Damien gestured to Elena. Your human can testify that Silvermere is manufacturing crises. That he's holding innocents as bait. Combined with Kieran's documents, it's enough to force an emergency tribunal. And if I fail? If Silvermere kills me? Then he proves himself exactly the monster we claim he is, and the council has no choice but to act. Damien's smile was cold. Either way, we win. Though obviously, your survival is preferable. Lucian looked at Elena, seeing the same calculation in her eyes that he felt in his gut. It was a gamble. A terrible, desperate gamble that required trusting vampires he barely knew and risking everything on the hope that the council still valued justice over politics, but it was also the only way to save Anna and Thomas without triggering a war. How many guards at the monastery? He asked Kieran. 12, last count, plus Silvermere himself. 13 against 1. Lovely odds. 13 against 2, Elena corrected. I'm coming with you. Absolutely, I can free the prisoners while you fight. I'm small, fast, and human enough that they won't see me as a primary threat. Her voice was steel. You need me, Lucian. Stop pretending otherwise. Damien laughed. She's magnificent. If you survive this, Thorn, I suggest you keep her. Not the time, Lucian growled. But he was already planning, his mind working through scenarios. We'll need a distraction. Something to divide Silvermere's forces. I can provide that. Kieran's eyes gleamed. I'm supposed to report back to him in an hour. If I'm late, he'll send guards to find me. That splits his attention, and gives us an opening. Lucian turned to Damien. How long to reach the council? Riding hard with fresh horses? 36 hours. Then we have until tomorrow night before tribunal forces arrive. We rescue Anna and Thomas, extract to neutral ground, and wait for official intervention. Lucian met each gaze in turn. If any part of this fails, we all die, or worse. Everyone understand? Nods all around. Elena stepped beside Lucian, slipping her hand into his. Together, she said simply. Together, he agreed, and felt something fundamental shift between them, partnership crystallizing into something that felt dangerously like love. They had, perhaps, 3 hours until midnight, 3 hours to prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of two innocent mortals, expose a conspiracy, and possibly end Lucian's 2-century exile in blood and fire. He looked at Elena, this extraordinary woman who'd chosen to stand beside a monster rather than flee to safety, and knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, he would fight to his last breath to protect her. "Let's go save my family," Lucian said, and the hunt began in earnest.